Parliament's been adjourned till noon.
For once, I support the disruption.
Thank you. You know, when Mr. Madhavan asked me to speak, he said I would follow on the two earlier speakers and talk about micro issues in Parliament. And I want to put a context to this. Pratap Mehta is like a theoretical physicist who thinks about the cosmos and the big issues. N.K. Singh is the practical research scientist who's handled these issues in the laboratory. I'm a lowly engineer who's got to talk about the nuts and bolts of the machine. No, I'm not being facetious. I actually want to use this analogy to explain something. I'm going to take off on two things that Pratap and NK said and expand from that. Basically, all three of us fit into one category in that we want reform. We want Parliament to be more effective. But there are nuanced differences in approach, although the objective is the same. So I want to start with something that Pratap concluded with. He said what's called for is a fundamental reboot, not tinkering. I'm going to disagree with that. And I'll come to something that NK said and extend that further. I'll tell you why I disagree. Not fundamentally. I really think we do need a fundamental reboot. I'm just saying it's not going to happen. Okay? Our democracy came about in its current form through a constituent assembly, which was preceded by a century of agitational politics. And the founding fathers and mothers had a mandate which nobody has today. There is nothing on the horizon remotely like a constituent assembly which could reboot the system. Shashi Tharoor and I have had a series of debates where he's talked about a presidential system. When I was new to Parliament a dozen years ago, I was very keen on a presidential system, but I realized very quickly that ain't going to happen in any time in the near future. And the presidential system itself has come under certain challenges. If you look at the gridlock in Washington, D.C., so I have, over these past few years, come to the conclusion that we can indeed tinker with the nuts and bolts that would make a very fundamental difference. I want to cite to you the example. If you've read a book called Nudge by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein, it's on the subject of choice architecture. Just to give you a simple example, if you look at school cafeterias, depending on how the food is laid out, the kids will eat differently. You have the cookies up front, they'll eat more cookies. You put the cookies back, and nearer them, you have the fruit and the veggies. Same food, just different layout. And it has been proven in study after study that they do make healthier choices, depending on how the choices are laid out for them. And if you haven't read that book, I suggest please do read it. It's quite a paradigm-shifting way of looking at things. Because the argument I'm going to make is, as a lowly engineer, you can actually tinker with the nuts and bolts of the machine that you have inherited and supercharge it. What is essentially the issue with our Parliament's functioning as already spelled out by Pratap and NK, which I agree with, as I told you? We are the world's largest democracy, but we are a work in progress. And is our democracy real? Yes, it is very real, as some people in Delhi have found out just last week. It is very real. Does that mean it is ideal? No, it's far from it. Does that even mean it works exactly like other democracies? Actually, no. Those of you who are familiar with the American, European, German, UK, other democracies might think you understand Indian democracy. You broadly do. But there are nuances, there are differences that you really do need to appreciate, which are quite significant. Let me explain this. When we got independence, we did get real independence. It was questioned by many international observers until 15 or 20 years ago. I remember growing up as a child, reading so many international articles, would this be India's last election? We did have a hiccup in the 70s, but otherwise we've always had real democracy. in terms of replacing elected people. But what did we not get in 1947 is important to understand. Must understand that because of the freedom movement, decades before 1947, the British started relaxing their grip. They had to provide space to the nationalist movement. So 28 years before 1947, 3 decades before, in a series of, it was the last of the Government of India Acts. We had a series of them over the previous 2 or 3 decades, culminating in 1919, 28 years before 1947. And that Government of India Act provided us a proto-parliament, which provided our founding fathers like Nehru, at that time Jinnah and others, a space. That parliament was elected by a tiny sliver of the elite. 5 million people were eligible to vote out of about 300 million population. Yes, it had a platform to articulate our angst, our freedom movement. What it did not have the power to do, unlike what you can see in an American Congress or even the British Parliament, is to truly challenge the Viceroy. The architecture of the engine, of the machine, was designed that the ultimate power rested with the Viceroy. I'll explain to you how that works. And most of that has continued till date, which is what we need to tinker with. We don't need a fundamental reboot. Just tinkering a few things would have a huge impact. So, when you have a structure where, whether you are an elected MP of the treasury benches or of the opposition, you are essentially the king's party or the viceroy's party. You don't need to have independent thought. What does that mean? You don't need research support. You don't need PRS. Ultimately, final decisions are decided at Viceroy's house. You don't have true independence of the legislative wing, as you understand it either in the presidential system or in the parliamentary system. So what we did get in 1947 is one very big thing, is that you get to really elect your representatives, and you do throw out the rascals every 5 years. But how Parliament runs is still based on the rules written in 1919, which means there is really only one rule. You have a thick rule book. You go through that thick rule book. There is one rule. It distills down to that. The one rule is you can try to throw the government out. Like today, there is a move by 6 MPs for a no-confidence motion against the government. Some of us are joining that. There doesn't seem to be enough numbers as of date. This is the urgency that Madhavan was talking about. I may be pulled out to Parliament. You can. So this is the nuclear option. You do have the nuclear option of trying to throw the government out. You do not have any other option. You do not have the option of trying to discuss something of importance. Let me explain how. Virtually every rule in our parliament is dependent on consensus. The actual wording is, it is left to the speaker's discretion, and the subtext, the subwording is that the speaker shall consult all the parties and take a decision. Consensus. What does that mean? When you have 40 parties in parliament, everybody has a veto. So, simple thing. What is to be on the agenda today? No rule. 40 parties have to agree. And if whatever is agreed to be discussed, shall it be a plain vanilla discussion or shall it end in a vote? No rule. 40 parties have to agree. Everybody has a veto. So when you look at parliamentary disruption, you think it's only opposition doing it? Dig into the roots of it. You'll find 2/3 of the time it is government doing it. Government has a veto. If government is sensitive about something, doesn't want to discuss, they veto it. This is not apparent to the public, not apparent on television. There is something called a business advisory committee, which meets every morning and advises the speaker. Unless there is consensus in that, the speaker cannot introduce the subject for discussion. How is this different from the UK or the US? In the UK, if 40 MPs decide that we want to discuss inflation this week, on Thursday, that's all you need. 40 MPs to sign on, and it must be discussed. We don't have that option. Out of 543 MPs in the Lok Sabha, 272 minimum required for government to be in place. You could have 150 or 200 MPs scream their lungs out that we want to discuss inflation because my constituents are really angry. Sorry. If all 40 constituents of all 40 parties don't agree, you cannot discuss it. Sometimes the government will concede a discussion after it becomes very untenable to not agree to a discussion. Could be civil nuclear deal, could be Telangana, could be anything. Sometimes the government will agree to a discussion, but will not agree to a voting discussion. Why? Because they expect that it will go against them and it will be a slap on their face, which could lead to a government crumbling. Why? Because the only option you have is the nuclear option. Either throw the government out or put them in there, really no questioning of them. That is where we are different from the UK, from the US, from Australia, from Canada, from Germany. That is where we need to tinker with the rules, and we can supercharge the machine by changing some nuts and bolts. I want to say something about what N.K. Singh said. He very lucidly talked about why should the budget be a secret? Why should these ideas not be debated in public before the budget is presented? My response to that is, why only the budget? Why should anything be a secret? Why should not any policy be debated in the public space, on television, on street corners, so that a national consensus is built? So we have developed ways of doing parliamentary business which are markedly different from any other democracy. Now, an attitude has been built up in our political class that if you've won an election, for 5 years you really ought not to be questioned too much. And it emanates from the parliamentary rules that the only option you can decide on if you get 50 MPs together is to press for a vote of no confidence. There is no other rule. Everything else, government has a veto, opposition has a veto, everybody has a veto. In the US, in Germany, in the UK, prime ministers and presidents who have won a mandate, nevertheless, every single day have to sell their ideas. Every single day, whether it is healthcare in the US, whether it is immigration in the UK, the leaders who have won a mandate have to sell the ideas to their own party, to their opponents, to the media, to the public. That doesn't happen in India. You'll often find governments introducing bills suddenly out of the blue, with no debate. There has been some change. In recent years, ministries have put up websites, they put up draft bills, white papers, and some discussion. But this is just a small step. It needs to be taken much further. So, I want to now start concluding. I'll take 4 or 5 minutes more to conclude. I've worked a lot doing some research. And talking about research, all MPs in India are given an allowance to have an office which is essentially equivalent to barely having one telephone operator. When we visit our counterparts in the US and the UK, you'll see they have full teams of people who do research, people who handle constituents, people who handle other responsibilities. And organizations like PRS are beginning to fill that gap. But we need to provide that from parliamentary resources as well. As I said, if you are a King's party, the Viceroy's party, either government or opposition, you don't really need research support because ultimately what are you going to do? Decisions are going to be taken for you up on the hill. But if you want to stand up as an independent legislature which doesn't always support the government, you do need research assistance. So let me talk about some of the tweaks. I call them tweaks. And I've come up with a couple of dozen of them, but I think 5 or so of them are really important, which I think would have a humongous effect in changing the choice architecture of the system. One of the things we can do, for instance, is make the nuclear option less frivolous. For moving a no confidence motion, today 50 MPs are able to move it. Why? Make it 150 MPs. Because in any case, you need 272 to overthrow a government. So if you're really serious, you should be able to get 150 MPs to at least sign a petition saying, don't make it frivolous, let's make it, so that makes the government more stable. Also, we should adopt a German system of no confidence, which is actually an alternate vote of confidence. Today what happens, when a vote of no confidence is moved, very often, half a dozen people who fancy themselves as potential prime ministers are quite kicked about it. They don't mind playing along, fishing in muddy waters. Because if there is instability, it could mean an opportunity for them. But the German option is, if you vote a no confidence in, say, Dr. Manmohan Singh, you simultaneously vote a confidence in somebody else. Let's say Mr. N.K. Singh. Now, N.K. Singh has a certain credibility and might actually attract a lot of people saying, great idea, he'd be better than Dr. Singh. But some people would say, hey, I'd rather Dr. Singh continue if I'm not going to get a shot, which would mean more stability for the system. But while assuring the government more stability, you have to make it possible for the government to be open to attack on many routine issues. What does that mean? The government should not have a veto in deciding what gets discussed or not. Like the UK, I think we should say, they have 40 MPs, I think we should say 50 MPs sign on to an agenda item. Let's say 50 MPs want to discuss Telangana. It must be discussed. No veto to any party. No discretion to the speaker. We could do something else also. The UK has 20 days in each session, which is given to the opposition to decide the agenda. We could do that. The government should not be afraid of voting discussions. Today the situation is, if you have a discussion on inflation and the House passes a sense of the House, where a majority of members vote that the government's performance on managing the economy is poor, it's a slap on the wrist. But it ought not to necessarily mean the government collapses. Today the system is, you have a nuclear option, you have no other option, so the government is very afraid to discuss anything which could be a slap on the wrist or a slap on the face, because it could then quickly spiral and snowball into a no confidence motion. So make the no confidence motion tougher, as I said. 50 MPs should be able to demand any discussion. 100 MPs should be able to demand a voting discussion. And at least 150 MPs, 3 times the current number, to demand a no confidence motion, which in any case ought to be an alternate confidence motion, not just a no confidence which muddies the waters. There are several other tweaks that I would suggest. I don't want to take up the time here. We can discuss this in Q&A. I've written a lot of op-eds about this. I continue to research the subject. I have a very able team of very enthusiastic and passionate young men and women who help me with this. I will keep on writing about these issues. I just want to mention 2 or 3 things and conclude. We have developed a system of party whips so that there's no individual choice left to members of parliament. Party whips are applicable to each and every motion in parliament, which means you have no independent thought. You can't stray from the party line, which I think is too much. It's too much of a diktat system from the top. This has actually been listed in PRS's summary of the issues today in the paper. I have propounded that the party whip be limited to no confidence motions or alternate confidence motions and money bills. Meaning, a government party in government should be able to issue a diktat to its members that you keep us in government and you help us pass the budget. On everything else, whips should not apply. Today what happens is if you defy the party whip, you are liable for disqualification as a member. That should go. Private members' bills. We last passed one 4 decades ago. So the system has become only government bills passed by convention. This is like the Viceroy's party. Only the Viceroy decides what bill will pass. That's got to change. If I, as an individual, bring about a bill for electoral reform, I have been, by the way, I have been advocating campaign finance reform. I have been advocating the kind of reform which the Supreme Court has judged today, which is that convicted MPs and MLAs automatically get disqualified. If I'm able to convince a majority of my colleagues, government should have no option to stop that, as is the case in other democracies. But this is a matter of convention. There's no rule today saying that you can't pass a private member's bill. We just have to change the convention back to what it was. I can go on and on. There are many such things that we can do which will fundamentally change. One of the things I keep talking about is that we are undergoing political reform in a manner that other democracies have gone through. I've written about a comparison to America's Gilded Age and progressive era of 100 years ago. And if you see today's situation, political situation, you'll see many similarities in India. Lots of corruption, lots of economic growth, at the same time lots of protest movements, and changes are happening. I've mentioned 2 or 3 of the welcome changes. As of a few weeks ago, convicted members get disqualified from parliament and assembly. Very, very big change. You're beginning to see the impact of that. If we can bring about campaign finance reform, I've advocated, for instance, that today, if parties which receive less than 20,000 rupees in any individual contribution don't have to account for it. Yet they get tax benefits. I've said that, like other democracies, political funds ought to be audited and put up in the public arena, and they should only get tax exemption if they account for all the money that they receive. Not if they say that we get it from lots of small donations, we can't account for it. These are some of the tweaks. I've highlighted half a dozen of them, but really I think even 5 or 6 of these tweaks would completely change the way our parliament functions and supercharge the machine. Thank you.